morning, class. Good morning, ma'am. Okay, we have just come back from the fruit break, right? It was your fruit break. What all did you eat?
Pear fruit.
Okay, pear fruit. See, students, there are so many different things around us, okay, which we eat. They are of different colors, different flavors, right? They are very tasty. But have you ever wondered, when we defecate, all the matter which we have eaten comes out as a foul smelling semi-solid, okay? That is the fecus. Have you ever wondered what transferred the food we eat into the fecus we ingest? So today we are going to study about digestion in humans. Today we are going to do an interesting activity which will make it quite clear how actually food breaks down from large piece into smaller pieces, and that is what chemically we call digestion. So here I have some bread pieces, okay? These bread pieces we have it in breakfast. What do? See, here this is the model. We basically eat bread from our mouth, okay? Any food item which we eat it through our mouth. What is eating? We cut it with our teeth, right? Then we take it into our mouth, we mix it with saliva, our tongue, teeth work together, mix it with saliva, and then we swallow. We can take these scissors to act as our teeth. Suppose this to be the buccal cavity. The buccal cavity is the cavity inside our mouth. So I am taking this plate to be a buccal cavity. We take in food, we cut it into smaller pieces with our teeth. The main cutting and biting teeth, what is its name?
Incisors.
Very good, incisors. So basically we cut the bread with our incisors. Now see, whenever we eat bread or anything, our mouth feels very dry, right? We have to either drink water or mix it with saliva. In our mouth, the saliva comes from the salivary glands. The salivary glands, they are present beneath our cheeks and they secrete saliva. Now what happens whenever we eat food? We cut it into smaller pieces with our teeth. Now here I am adding saliva, because when we chew, we also add saliva from the salivary glands. This makes our food moist and easy to swallow. Now I have mixed saliva. Now for the action of the rest of our teeth, the molars and premolars, I can use my hands, okay? So using my hands, I can just mash everything up. Now this is the basic process which continues inside our mouth as long as we chew the food. That is why it is said that we should properly chew our food. Now I have mixed everything and our chewed food is ready to be swallowed, right? Now this chewed food along with the saliva is given a term. It is called bolus. The basic chewed food which we swallow, it is called bolus, right? So now from the buccal cavity, the food goes down the esophagus, right? The food goes down the esophagus or the food pipe, which is a tube. The food passes down, you can see it better. The yellow tube which you are seeing, it is the esophagus or the food pipe. With regular contractions and relaxations, the food is pushed down the food pipe. The food is pushed down and now it enters the stomach. You can see this yellow tube? Yes? Now the food is passed down and it reaches the stomach. The stomach has muscular walls and it is the first site for active digestion. Now what happens? Let us assume this to be our stomach. Okay? So I can pass the chewed food, it goes through the esophagus into the stomach, right? So I am passing the chewed food into the stomach. Now just as the food enters the stomach, the food from the esophagus enters the stomach, the walls here contract. Why contract? So that the food does not go back into the esophagus. Sometimes when we vomit, the movement is opposite. Okay? So for regular digestion, what happens? These walls contract just as I have sealed it. Okay? Now the food is inside the stomach. Now the stomach, as we have discussed, has muscular walls. Okay? So they will contract, relax and movement in all directions. So we can manipulate it here. I am contracting, relaxing, everything inside the stomach is being mixed. All the contents are being mixed, or we can say the solid food which we ingested, okay, it is being broken down into simpler substances. These movements which I am doing with my hand, you can correlate it with the churning movements, right? Okay. Now some of the churning is over. Now what happens? As you said, the stomach secretes
mucus, hydrochloric acid, digestive juices.
Yes, mucus is basically the inner lining of the stomach which protects it or makes it moist. Now there are hydrochloric acids which are secreted on the food. Okay? So for that purpose, we can take hydrochloric acid, right, and we can put it. It makes the food moist, easy to move. It also kills some bacteria or whatever microorganisms which may have entered into our body along with the food. Okay? So now I have added HCl. Now we can again keep on the churning movements. Now these movements continue and the food, the churning movement started from here and the food now passes to the end of the stomach, and this region from where the food from the stomach enters the small intestine, you can basically see this creamy region, this is the small intestine. This is extended here. The small intestine lies, the boundary is the large intestine and the small intestine lies inside it. So you can see the small intestine which has connections to the stomach. So food from the stomach goes into the small intestine. So basically this was our stomach. Now the food is ready to pass on to the small intestine. Now what will happen? The first part of the small intestine is called the duodenum, right? The place where the food enters from the stomach is called the duodenum. So I'll just pass the contents into the duodenum. So I can use a spatula for the purpose. Some of the food, I'm transferring it into the duodenum. Now this food which has just come from the stomach, you know what is this called? It is called chyme. The food which we swallowed is called the bolus, and the food which comes from the stomach into the small intestine is called chyme. So when we enter the first part of the small intestine, the duodenum, the food is called chyme. Now what happens? In the duodenum, there is a very interesting phenomenon. This part is the duodenum. Now there are two glands in our body. The first gland, which is the liver. The liver, as you know, is the largest gland of the body and its secretions help in digestion. So the juices from the liver mainly the green part which you are seeing here is a small gallbladder. Okay, gallbladder secretes bile juice. Very good. And bile juice helps in the digestion of fats. Okay, whatever fat is present in our chyme, bile juice secretions will digest it. So we can put bile juice, right? So in our duodenum, the chyme is present, and in the chyme we will add bile juice, right? So we can add bile juice into our chyme. This is actually how everything functions inside our body. This is how bile juice is added, right? Apart from this bile juice, you can see there is another gland. If I remove the stomach, you can see behind the stomach there is another gland called the pancreas. So basically two major glands which help in digestion, liver and pancreas. Liver secretes liver juices, the gallbladder secretes bile juice. Along with that, the pancreas secrete pancreatic juices, right? So we have two juices, first bile juice and second pancreatic juice. So now we can add pancreatic juice also. The juice from the pancreas also helps in digestion. So I am adding pancreatic juice. Now we can continue with our process of churning. The churning process continuously goes on. So see how the food looks inside our digestive system. The tasty food which we eat, everything is turning into a mixture, right? Because of the action of the digestive juices. Okay. So basically now from the duodenum, the food moves from the duodenum into the small intestine. The food from the duodenum moves into the small intestine. The small intestine is a very long pipe. You know its length? 7.5. Yes, 7.5 meters. It is a very long and coiled pipe. Okay, so you can see it is a very long and coiled pipe. The food moves from these coils, and small intestine is the basic place where absorption of nutrients takes place. So we can take this. Now the food from the small intestine passes through the coils. Now we can suppose this to be the small intestine. Now what we will do? The chyme which we had in the duodenum, it passes. Now we can transfer it to the small intestine. Okay, so the chyme I have transferred it to the small intestine. Now in the small intestine also churning movements occur. Now you can see in the small intestine, I said it is the major reason for absorption of nutrients. Okay, so absorption of nutrients basically occurs in the small intestine. Villi increase the surface area for absorption. Inside you can see some outgrowths, these rough outgrowths, these we can suppose to be the villi. Okay, now see, what have I labeled this as? Blood. We can suppose this to be blood. Now as the food goes into the small intestine, the nutrients are absorbed and the nutrients go into the blood. The nutrients absorbed from the small intestine go into the blood. This is the basic process by which the food we eat is converted into the source of the energy we use. So we can have this, the blood was looking clear, right, but now it has become translucent because of the nutrients that have been absorbed from the small intestine, right. It goes into the blood, and from the blood it can transport to all the regions of our body. But now this food also has to go some distance, right. The process is not ended here. So from the small intestine, from the small intestine, the entire nutrients are absorbed. You can see the blood vessels. Yes, students? These are the blood vessels. They are throughout the length of the small intestine. They absorb the nutrients. Now the nutrients go into the large intestine. The large intestine is the last part of the digestion. Basically, active digestion does not take place in the large intestine because all the nutrients have already been absorbed in the small intestine. Then what happens in the large intestine? When the food, this was the small intestine, the very long small intestine, we can assume this to be the large intestine, right? So, I am opening this and transferring the contents into the which intestine? Large intestine. Into the large intestine. So, I am opening it and transferring the contents into the large intestine. So, these movements which I am showing, these are the movements by which the food passes through the entire digestive system. Now, the food has reached the large intestine. Okay. Now, this undigested food which has reached the large intestine, the water from this food will be absorbed. You can see the water or whatever liquid contents may have been inside this large intestine will be absorbed. Okay. So, absorption of water takes place in the large intestine, and at last whatever is left, whatever undigested food is left is temporarily stored in the rectum, and when time comes, when nature calls, we go and take out it. Okay. So, this was the process of egestion. Okay, students. So, today we discussed about the entire process of digestion and also saw it actually happening through a very interesting activity in which we transformed our solid food. In this case, we took bread, crumbled it, broke down into smaller pieces, added digestive juices, chemically broke it down, and finally the nutrients and the water were absorbed by the small intestine and the large intestine respectively, and finally we digested the waste. This is the process or the basic metabolic activity by which all living organisms live and gain their energy.